Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day two. We're just going to wait till about 10:05 to get started to let a few people roll in, and then we'll get the ball rolling. So thanks. All right, good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. We may still have a few more people trickling in, but we can go ahead and get the ball rolling. So again, my name is Ross Cooper. I'm a California Sea Grant Fellow who works with the State Water Resources Control Board, and this is day 2 of the Trash Datathon. So today we're really going to be building on a lot of what we started yesterday, breaking out again into the breakout groups and continue working on those projects and discussions and collaborations that began yesterday. It looks like we have a couple of new familiar faces, a couple of new faces here, and I want to take a moment to welcome you. What we're going to do this morning before we break into those groups is we're going to have a brief presentation from Scott Coffin, who's got a pretty interesting app he's been developing he wants to show us. After that, we are going to have a very brief just kind of summary from each of the project or the group leaders about what their group did yesterday and what they're going to do today. So for those of you who were not here yesterday, you have a bit of insight into which group resonates the most with you and which one you'd like to be a part of. So for those of you who are not here yesterday, you'll notice people have a number in front of their names. Those numbers correspond to a certain group. So after the group leaders give their very brief introductions, go ahead and rename yourself and put a number in front of your name, either 1, 2, or 3, which will correspond to the group you'd like to be in, and then we'll make sure you wind up with that group. So before we get to that, Scott, if you want to go ahead and give a quick rundown of this app, sounds very interesting, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Awesome, thanks, Ross. Do a quick screen share here. Alrighty, so I am a research scientist here at the State Water Resources Control Board and have been tasked with evaluating the human and ecological health effects of microplastics in drinking water and in marine environment. So the issue with microplastics, assessing the toxicity, is that it's an extremely multifactorial issue. We're talking about many different types of polymers, continuous variables with sizes, shapes, adsorbed toxicants, and so getting one toxicological value from this is not a trivial matter. So a little bit of background: we found microplastics in tap water in 2017 all around the world. In the United States, 94% of tap water samples contain microplastics, and this prompted the California legislature to pass a bill that requires the State Water Board to do something about it. So that includes defining microplastics, which we did, and some additional measures, including adopting a standardized method, 4 years of testing and analysis, and in particular, developing a health-based guidance level, which brings me to this issue of this extremely diverse contaminant suite that we're dealing with microplastics I mentioned earlier. So untangling this many-sided knot is not trivial, and assigning one value to a universe of particles for toxicity really requires looking at all of the toxicity data in many different ways, flipping the coin, or the many-sided coin, and over many different times, if you will. So we have an expert panel that is currently evaluating our database that we've compiled, and in order to help them with determining a useful value for health effects for both human health and ecosystem, we built an app that it essentially takes all of the metadata that is available for toxicity studies. It's a review of all of the toxicity studies available for microplastics. We've got about 160 for aquatic organisms and about 85 for mammalian species. And the issue with these meta-analysis is that the data is essentially static. When you read a study, you can't just interact with the data very quickly. You have to pull down the data and do a lot of work on your own in order to be able to visualize it. And we built a solution to this, which is essentially an interactive app that anyone can play with the data in many different ways, and they don't have to be a data scientist in order to understand these complex relationships. One of the other critical things that we're addressing with this app is aligning all of the data based on probability distribution functions. This is a rather novel concept that Albert Coleman's pioneered in 2019, where you're able to convert between different sizes, shapes, and polymer types. So the x-axis can become mass per volume, volume per volume, or particle count per volume. So all of those are interchangeable. And so I'm going to switch over to give you a quick glimpse of what the app looks like. It's currently not available to the public because we're still developing it. But when we finalize our report for the health effects, it'll be open to open source, open code to the public. So if you want to follow us on Twitter to get updates about when we do release the app, you can follow us at Tomex app. And so I'm going to switch to the app. So this is built in R Shiny, and the first tab just gives you an overview of the different types of data that is available in our app. I mentioned that we compiled all of the existing toxicity studies up until about the middle of 2020. We're still adding studies. And so this sort of gives you an idea of, for what studies are in vitro, in vivo, different life stages, exposure routes. So this is not interactive at the moment. This is sort of just giving you an overview of what you can play with. The interactive components that we currently have is an exploration tab where you can filter by essentially all of the pertinent things for toxicity. So what is the endpoint that you're looking at? Fitness, immune response, stress. You can filter out different polymer types, the different classes of organisms, and within that, all of the different species. You can just look at freshwater, marine, or terrestrial, different life stages, of course, different size bins for particles, which can have big differences. And then I mentioned before that you can actually, this app will actually convert particles per milliliter to milligrams per milliliter to volume per milliliter using probability density functions for those different units. And so you can choose if you want it to be reported, converted, or all. You can also change the plot type. We have a couple different options and some more aesthetic themes. And so you can see here that there's a lot of different, what this is showing is the effect, if you see an effect or not, for different organisms at different concentrations. And since we're looking at virtually all particle data, there's a huge spread, like many orders of magnitude. But if we were to filter down to just like one size bin, you would see these box plots compress a lot. Here you can see there's a lot of overplotting on that one, but we're looking at every endpoint in the database, so just to give you an idea. And so looking at data like this for deriving thresholds is not particularly useful because we know that there are different species that are dramatically have dramatically different sensitivities to these particles. So we also built what's called a species sensitivity distribution tab, which this will actually give you a regulatory threshold if you fill it out with the information for your specific ecoregion. And so choosing your effect metrics, we can filter the database to give you, it arranges the data by the most sensitive organism. And it'll fit different distributions to the data and give you a goodness of fit table. So usually you choose whatever information criteria you prefer, Bayesian, Akake's, and then using bootstrapping, you can compute the confidence intervals, and it gives you this cumulative distribution plot where, depending on where you want to set your regulatory threshold, you can change, the hazard concentration. 5 is usually the default. And then here you go, 1 times 10 to the negative 3 milligrams per liter, I guess 1 microgram per liter for this particular filtering would be your regulatory threshold. And then, you can download the data. There's some further analytics here to see sort of how the data looks and other ways. And we also have, this is just the aquatic side. We also have a completely separate version for mammalian toxicity that does pretty similar things. But again, we're hoping to make this open to the public sometime this year. And if you want to get updates, follow us at Tomex app on Twitter. And I can take any questions if you have some time.
That was awesome. That was really cool, Scott. Thanks for showing us that. That's really interesting. Yeah, if anyone has a question, they can ask Scott. Otherwise, they could.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Scott, I can't believe it. That's really amazing. It's going to be a great resource, and I look forward to seeing how it evolves over time. The language you were using was particle. Does that mean, is that exclusive to particle, or are you also including fibers?
We include fibers as well. So that's, you can filter by the different morphologies: fragment, fiber, sphere, film.
And how is that accommodated in terms of the kind of density models, the concentrations and volume specifically? How do you calculate volume on a fiber?
So that is estimated through a, we essentially assume that all fibers are long cylinders, which is the calculation. And we also, it's probabilistic, right? So we use probability density functions of measured particles based on a published paper from 2019. And so we'll just, we'll pick like the mean or something from that. We don't, it's not Monte Carlo based though, so we're not randomly picking every time.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Scott, really cool. I definitely resound what Tony said as well. I think this is going to be a very big thing for the field of microplastics research, and I'm glad that you're making it open access, and it sounds like it's going to be extremely useful. One thing that I was thinking about when I was seeing this is thinking about the exponential growth rate of the number of papers that are being published annually, and just thinking about like, what are your expectations of you know, reality for, let's say, an order of magnitude more publications next year, 10,000 publications. Like, is it realistic to be able to continue keeping this live and updated, you know, even just 2 years from now? And what are your thoughts on how you can, you know, keep it as close to live as possible?
Thanks, Win. So that's a big issue, because mining the data to import it is non-trivial, especially if the data is not already available in another review paper. Right. So what we're thinking is having once or twice annual hacky days that anyone that wants to contribute can just come in for the day, and we'll just mine. We'll go through the literature that we have and get it in. We're also hoping to have a data import portal. So when you publish your talks paper, we'll give you the guidelines of how to upload that data, and so we can get it in a lot easier.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah, I like the idea of a microplastics hackathon. I don't know if that's happened before. Maybe we should do that. I want to be a part of that.
There's so many analyses that we're currently doing with this data other than the app. A lot of like multivariable statistics. We're running some machine learning models to try and predict toxicity with all these different factors. And I wish that I could share the database with you all right now, but unfortunately we kind of have to wait until we publish it. But after that, we'd be happy to have bring this data set to this community.
Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, Gary, did you look like you had your hand up to ask something?
You know, I had the same question as Win, so got it.
Gotcha.
Sounds awesome. Scott, I was just trying to keep up with all the functionality you were showing us as we were going through it there. Really impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. It looks like Maladi, sorry if I got your name wrong, has a question as well too.
Hi, yes, it's Maladi. Thanks, Scott. That was a great presentation. It's such a cool use of Shiny, which is capable of so much. One thing I was wondering about, just as somebody who's like less familiar with microplastics, but more familiar with Shiny, and what's awesome about Shiny is it makes data public and accessible to a wider audience. And I was wondering, and so the possibilities of college kids and such being introduced to the microplastics data very early on. But at the same time, like you said, there's so many types of microplastics. And I was wondering if to your Shiny app, you want to add like a wiki with book down of like what, just species ID, like, or type microplastics ID, like what is each type?
That's a great idea. we really want to make this app a learning tool as well as a functional app for researchers and for regulators, policymakers. So we'd certainly be interested in working with educators to make this, to build this into curriculums that are focused on microplastics and trash. So thanks a lot for that comment.
One more really quick idea before we move on, Scott. Something to consider with respect to Wynn's original question about keeping pace with the publication rate of all of this material is that at some point, I'm not saying right immediately, but bear in mind that I think you might need to leverage natural language processing of artificial intelligence to mine a lot of these articles and highlight the kind of the keywords and other things that you're looking for. And natural language processing is part of the artificial intelligence world and it's getting very, very sophisticated. So, you know, that's something that would be something I think it would be worth considering as you move forward.
Thanks, Tony. I might be hitting you up for some code recommendations.
Great.
Well, fortunately, we have a group dedicated to that kind of stuff. So on that note, it looks like since we do have some new faces, if each group leader wouldn't mind just giving a very brief rundown of their group number, group name, and what the kind of things you're going to be working on today, that will give our new attendees a chance to see what's going on in each group. So if you want to start with group one.
Cool, yeah. When we're the trash data dashboard group, yesterday we focused on trying to figure out how best to build a dashboard which would help people navigate the cornucopia of trash data options that are out there, develop metadata standards for labeling all of these data sets, and then have some sort of visualization for the dashboard. We came to the we came to several new conclusions and kind of took this project in a new direction. So today we'll be focusing on critiquing a mocked up dashboard that I've whipped up with using comments from the other collaborators in the group, and really talking a little bit more 100-foot view of the problem, and having some good discussions on that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Wynn. Oh yeah, Tony and Walter, if you guys want to talk about group two.
Sure. Tony, you want me to go for it?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. Hello, everyone. So we're group two, Walter Yu from Caltrans and Tony Hale from SFEI, and we are the AI ML group. And today we are going to get all hands on. So we're going to start off with a walkthrough of a Google Collaboratory notebook, which everyone will go ahead and share and make a copy. And then we're going to do a very simple walkthrough of the code. Don't be intimidated. And then we'll do a little bit of development and let folks, kind of work on different things. And then also we have some additional items to share. We have a way to do some visualization with mapping in Python. And then also we have some open data sets, which we can walk through. So again, something for everybody. Come on, all. Again, we'll be hands-on. And at the end of the day, we are going to give everybody their own trash classifier trash level classifier to take home with them and tweak on their own. So back to the group.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, and then our third group is headed by Gary Conley and Shelly Moore.
Yeah, hey folks, Gary Conley of Second Nature, and we've got Shelly Moore at SFEI. We're dealing with aligning trash monitoring with filling critical knowledge needs. We're keeping it trashy, keeping it classy over here in group three. We're tracing this process to get all the way from management questions through data collection, experimental design, analysis, and creation of data products, and identifying what those steps in the process are, where the current gaps are in terms of data types and data collection designs in the data that we currently have available. Yesterday, we identified a specific set of research questions of interest to the group, identified what we think are the primary barriers of getting from those questions to critical management question knowledge needs getting filled. And today we're going to be putting some of those pieces together that we delved into detail on yesterday to try to make our chain of reasoning to get all the way for our specific research questions from those questions to the data products that are needed to fill those knowledge needs, and identify which links in the chain that we think right now are particularly weak and could use some attention. Basically, the reasons that we are not currently able to answer the management questions surrounding trash that we think are the most pressing at the moment. So it's pretty high level, conceptual level stuff. We had a pretty broad group of perspectives in the group yesterday, and expecting some more good discussion today. Shelly, anything else?
Nope, that sounds good, Gary.
All righty.
All right, thank you to the group leaders for giving us that quick rundown. So groups 1, 2, and 3, if you would be able to rename yourself on Zoom and put one of those numbers in front of your name, that will kind of help us keep track of which group you should be in. In just a moment, we'll open up those breakout rooms, and you should be able to navigate to that room yourself. If not, I'll be staying in this main room, and if you run into any issues, I can help place you into the room that you need to be in or want to be in. Same agenda timing as yesterday, so we will be taking a break from 12 to 1. If you want to go get lunch, catch up on emails. If you want to stay in the rooms, that's totally fine. The breakout rooms will remain open. We won't be meeting back in here at 12 or anything. Everyone will come back to this main room at 2:30 today. We'll give you guys heads up when that time is coming up. And at that time, everyone will kind of give each group will present on what they did today, essentially, and then we can talk about next steps and start planning what we want to do next with all this cool stuff we did. So if we want to go ahead and pop open those breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everybody. It looks like there's a few more people still stuck in there, so they'll be back anytime now. Actually, okay, good. Looks like we're good. Cool. All right, well, I am looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say about what they accomplished today and yesterday. Once again, we're all so grateful you all decided to sign up for this today and put our heads together and work on this stuff, because I think it's an awesome, diverse group of perspectives and backgrounds. I think will be really cool to see the output of everything. Scott, yet another hat. I don't know how many costume changes you had planned for today, but I do appreciate that. Cool. Okay. So I guess we'll just do same as yesterday. Group 1 dashboard team, if you want to go ahead and give us an update on just what you talked about, what you've done over yesterday and today, and if you've got anything lined up for the future.
Cool. Yeah. Should I share my screen? We have like a couple little slides. Is that cool?
Of course.
All right, so what we did in the data dashboard team was we started out really thinking about all of the different trash data sets that are out there and how we can filter through them as efficiently as possible to find the data that we need. And we started this by thinking about a database, and we had a prototype developed for our database, which is the Open Science Framework trash data treasure trove. And we went through and started to tabulate some of the metadata in here. But then we quickly found out that this framework is really complicated to actually harvest the data from it. And it was really challenging for users who are not familiar with the database, this platform, to get started and to share their data and to share metadata on here, as well. To be able to access the database and upload and change things, you have to be a contributor, which can create other roadblocks for us. So then we kind of restructured. Also, we're thinking about like totally building a full dashboard, which we just don't have time to do that in a session like this. So that's okay. We didn't get to the dashboard, but we did think about the dashboard quite a bit. And we talked about it and kind of talked about what we'd like to see on it. So some of the main takeaways that we developed from the once we realized that the OSF framework was not really going to work for this kind of metadata sharing, we switched over to good old-fashioned Google form. And let's see, we have that somewhere. I think it's here, but yeah, there we go. So yeah, we have this Google form now, a little bit more intuitive. People are more familiar with Google Forms, and we can share this link to anybody. They don't need to have special permissions or something like that to be able to upload, share data, and add metadata. So it's just like a little form that they add a file and then kind of go through and check off the boxes here to tabulate the metadata. So then moving on, we did talk about our dashboard and like future of what a good dashboard would look like. We had a little prototype for the dashboard, try to make a real prototype for the dashboard, but got way too distracted with the challenges of getting the metadata from OSF formatted into like a machine readable format. So anyways, this is kind of the outline of what the dashboard, what we'd like to see the dashboard look like. Something like this, some like filter buttons, filtering by date range, location, and then basically it pops up with all of the data sets that are within that filter. And one of the most important things here is that these data set links you back to the original source of the data. As well, we'll also be storing some of the data in a backup file on OSF or some other platform maybe, just so that way we have this database backed up. Basically, sometimes these databases go down and then we will no longer have access to it if all we have is a link. So yeah, and another thing that we're going to be doing is saving the methods, like a PDF of the methods for each of the data sets. That is like gold, because one of the big questions right now is how do we QA QC methods? And I know Shelly Moore and Tony Hill have worked a lot on that. I'm really excited for their playbook and stuff coming up. That's super cutting edge. So we're gonna be able to actually utilize some of that, hopefully in this as part of this. Maybe there could be a filter button here that's like data quality or something like that. So, all right, yes. So, okay, filtering features, and we would like to see also several visualizations. There was kind of a need expressed by people in the group that there's not really a good way to visualize trash data along with other environmental concerns, such as endangered species and other environmental pollutants. And that would be really nice to build down the road sometime. And then key knowledge gaps that we identified. So there's like I said, a method for continued quality assurance. We think there's not really a straightforward way right now to label data, trash data, on how good of quality it is. Then the definition of trash is not necessarily going to mean the same thing to everybody. Some people define trash much more on a continuum and see it as even being associated to climate change and other pollutants, and we should consider that perspective along with the development of this. And then the last one is who is this database for? So like when somebody enters the database, they can kind of tell us what they're looking for. Like, oh, I'm a watershed manager, and I'm looking for data on I'm going to analyze this data or something like that, and then we can personalize their experience of how they maneuver through the database based on that, and that'll be part of the filtering and part of the user experience. So yeah, we covered a lot of ground, and I think we kind of made a big pivot in the middle of this, but I think it was a good pivot because it'll mean that this project will be a lot more successful in the future, and definitely continue pushing it down the field. So thanks everybody who was on our team. We had a lot of fun. We talked a lot about open data and data colonialism also. If you don't know what that is, but want to look it up. So, all right, thanks.
Yeah, right on. You guys, yeah, thanks for that, Win. You guys certainly did cover a lot of ground. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different perspectives to consider when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I think that you guys certainly kept all that in the forefront when doing that. That's awesome. A really good job, you guys. Does anybody have any questions for Win or Group 1 before we move on?
May I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
And this is, I just want to first of all, congratulate you on delivering such great material. I mean, that's a really rich set of outputs. I can't believe it. That's something to be admired. Among the things you listed was a form used for metadata collection and a way to attach the data or files to it. Just want you to be, maybe this has a lot to do with data colonialism, but I want you to be aware that that one known limitation of using Google Forms is that and maybe that was just used as a mock-up, but when it becomes operational, know that you can't have anonymous data submissions, file submissions rather, I should say. So if you have an attachment, it means that you have to have a Google account. So that's kind of the colonialism I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It is part of colonialism, and it's hard to avoid data colonialism. Thank you for pointing that out.
And there are workarounds. If you wanted to stay with the Google form for its advantages, you can use little tools like File Upload Forms or File Request Pro as a way to adapt the baseline performance.
Oh, cool.
It's something that we do at SFEI. We think that Google Forms can be very useful. So really for its attachment to Google Spreadsheets, Google Sheets. So anyway, just wanted to point that out so that you don't end up like changing direction because you stumble upon that limitation.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I didn't even realize this is definitely just a mock-up at this point. And yeah, I'll look into the Google, the File Upload Forms and File Request Pro. Thanks.
Cool.
Okay, great. Yeah, awesome, guys. Okay, well, does anyone else have anything for question 1, or should we move on? All right. Okay, in that case, Group 2.
Okay. Tony, shall I do the honors?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and grab the screen share. So we were group 2, AI and modeling, machine learning. So can everyone see the slide here? Trash level classifier. This is our trash level classifier. So we got down and dirty with machine learning basically all day. So this was our, by majority vote with the group. There was a lot of interest in doing a trash level classifier. We went ahead, there's a prepared Google Collaboratory notebook, which we all, basically made a copy and started working with. It's basically a collaborative Jupyter notebook, which, basically did a walkthrough of all the code. And so it's here in the links. And then we also have a data set. So the data set we used for the notebook is it's an open data set from the city of LA. It's all the clean stat data set, which we'll preview in a moment. And then you also just want to highlight other things. We basically spent the entire session really deep diving, going through all the different libraries, functionality of Python to do the machine learning. So we spent the majority here, but if we had time, we also had a version available for the R folks out there. So I guess Gary and others might be pleased to know Google Colab also runs R. So we spent a little bit of time to learn how to run R in Colab, Google Collaboratory. So it's not Python only. And then also I have an example which I prepared using the same, almost like a parallel, using the same classifier, but in R. And then just an article from Towards Data Science of how to run R within Google Colab. So it's not a Python only tool. We also spent time on computer vision. There was a lot of interest on computer vision, which is run primarily in Google Colab using TensorFlow. So we looked briefly at 2 examples, one with object detection. So if we wanted to say pick bottles and litter and cigarette butts from images, this is a template provided by Google to help to do so. And then also there's a image classifier. So this one was using a flower data set, which I'll preview at the very end. We didn't have quite enough time to get to this, but again, it was something that we spent a bit of time on before we moved on. And then sadly, we did not get around data visualization, but if we had, we would have tried to visualize our geospatial data using the Folium Python package, but didn't get around to this, but did make it available. And I think the last was we did look a bit at open data. So, we talked a bit about the California open data portal as well as the geo portal, and then also the Southern California and Sacramento area open data, coalition of governments open data portals, which have, again, some nice, clean, tidy data sets. So moving onwards, this was the City of LA clean data set that we looked at as an example for our notebook. And just a very brief overview, it was basically trying to rate or rank trash levels based on City of LA and looking at basically most city blocks, alleyways, and things like that. This is hosted on the open data portal. You'll also notice that you could download the data set in a tabular format. There's also geospatial data, which you basically consume as a web service. And then they give you a little more information and some basic, the column names of the data set. Geospatial data, so this is what that data set looks like represented throughout LA. So we'll zoom out. Basically, the legend is that green is clean, right? And yellow is probably moderate, and then red is not clean. And the reason this mattered was because we were doing some classification. So if we fed this data set, there were about 30,000 records, about 1 per block or alleyway that they looked at for Q1 of 2016. Then that's what we trained our notebook on. Speaking of which, this was a notebook that we looked at. This is Google Collaboratory. It looks and feels like Google Docs, and it is because you can save your own copy to Google Drive. So therein lies the benefit of it. Most participants in our group made a copy, and then we went ahead and looked at the different examples. We also spent some time looking at how to use Google Collaboratory itself. So this is an interactive tool that looks and feels like Google Docs. We also spent some time on actual data science. We looked at how to basically generate a random data set and do a silly little plot here. So we spent some time here. We also looked very briefly at machine learning. Apparently, Google has a crash course in machine learning. So if you just Google that, you can find it. There's a whole slew of mini courses that they have on machine learning, which is really useful. Again, we spent some time here as far as what are the different components of Google Colab, how to actually consume data from other Google products. And then here's the machine learning crash course that we talked about. So there's a full course website, let that load. And then again, then we went on to the trash classification. There's a whole lot of code and don't want to scare people away. In summary, we did 2 plots. So we did a density plot. Again, this was pre-made, but we spent a lot of time to walk everybody through it. This was of the segment score trash level. And then we also did one with a correlation plot, just looking at correlations between columns to visually inspect the data set. And then finally, we moved on to spend quite a bit of time here of how to dissect the data set and then train our model. So we got it into a random forest classifier. And then finally, we did some prediction and testing, and we generated a heat map to verify our results. And that was what you see on the slide. And so for the most part, we got some pretty good scores. Not as many false positive, false negatives. Again, very high level demo. And then this is the machine learning crash course that we talked about. So again, if you were to just Google this up, but basically they have a whole slew of miniature courses that you could go through. So they're all, nice little videos that they have. Seems pretty interactive, and didn't have too much to dive in, but I'd assume it'd probably hook up with Google Colab to make it interactive. And then to wrap up, we didn't have time to get here, but this is what we were, I was talking about computer vision and being able to run it within Colab, but here's a full-blown example using TensorFlow and Google Colab. And so we didn't quite get to this, but there was some interest, so we spent a little bit of time talking about it. With that, Tony or the group, any other, if you wanted to chime in, anything I missed?
Just to say that we have a recording of today's event, and so the breakout room is recorded. So if you have an interest in digging into the code, I mean, the difference between yesterday and today was yesterday it was kind of more conceptual, and we talked about the types of questions that artificial intelligence can address and what the models can do. Today we were really digging into the nuts and bolts of the syntax, and so it'd be really good for someone who has some technical acumen or interest to maybe plug into the recording and get a tour of things. Moreover, we have a list of different resources that were named in the course of the of today's event. So all the concrete like references to libraries and training materials. So we welcome you to take some time to look at that or refer someone who would be interested to it.
All right, thanks, Ross, or thanks, Tony. And then back to you, Ross, or the group.
Hey, awesome job, guys. Yeah, no, I think that some of that coding does look pretty daunting when you just look at it, but I think having the recording to really walk through it is really going to help people be able to walk to as if they were there to go through it with you guys.
Oh, we spent 2 hours on that notebook alone. Yeah, totally. That's what the video was about, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's really cool stuff. Yeah, and yeah, so in the spirit of that, with all 3 groups, we're going to compile the findings together, so everybody will have access to the archived discussions. We'll have the recordings we don't have recordings from yesterday, unfortunately, but we'll have the recordings from today. We'll have the Google slides. There will be a wealth of resources out there for you to be able to look through if you're interested in a group that you were not in. Cool. All right. Does anybody else have anything for group 2 before we move on? Does not appear so. Okay, great. In that case, group 3, if you guys want to finish this off.
Sure. Thanks, Ross. So we were aligning trash monitoring with knowledge needs. So we tried to come up with some unique insights so that Tony and Walter and group 2 don't completely put us out of business as analysts and scientists next week or anything. We started with some questions. I don't know, maybe a machine learning algorithm could come up with these questions. I'm not sure, but we had a pretty diverse group and had a diverse array of questions. They're color coded on this slide that you're looking at now based on our current capacity to address them. So going from excellent down to poor, green to red. We have little tickers on the side there with people voting for which questions they think are most important or relevant to them. We consolidated those into a more finite set of 4 questions that we're going to use to drive our process towards data products through the next couple of days. We then moved on to identifying current gaps or barriers for addressing those questions in terms of monitoring design, data collection, coordination between data generators, data synthesis, and product creation. And again, graded those from a mild barrier all the way up to a showstopper, and did the same thing. We have little tickers here that tell us how interested everybody is in each of these barriers and getting those solved, and did the same thing, collapse those down into a more finite set of those top ranked gaps. The next step was to map those gaps onto the space of the questions. So this is just a plot with each of those questions in a quadrant and the relevance for each existing gap mapped into that space. So the closer it is to a question, the more preventative that gap is in impairing our capacity to be able to address that question. That's where we ended day 1. And then we picked back up there on day 2 and started talking about data types. That's the next element in our framework that we need to get from questions to data products. And so we borrowed this from what Shelly's been working on, developing the trash monitoring playbook. I don't know if you want to say a couple words about this at all, Shelly, for the group. This sort of was our structure for defining data types as we.
Yeah, I think I'll leave it for right now in the interest of time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. We use that structure from the playbook to define which data types and associated use cases were most relevant to each of these questions, just sort of trying to narrow the scope of inference that we were going to address for each of these questions. And that's what the plot looks like here. There's a whole bunch of information that got scattered at the wall here, but that was the intent, to try to get some ideas out so that we can create some structure down the road. The next step was to map all of those ideas onto a framework to trace this line from management questions, getting all the way to data products, interpretation, and communication. And so that's what you see on the slide here, is how folks kind of went through and tried to articulate what the information required and kind of with a coherent rationale the whole way through the process, stepping through each of these elements from hypotheses, experimental design to get to those data products. The colors that are in the cells up here indicate sort of the weakest links in the chain that the group perceived at this point. So the darker color red indicates for each research question, which is listed on the far left here, where given current data collection and interpretation efforts, where those weakest links exist. So that's one of the primary insights that came out of this exercise. We looked at a few examples of data products that result at the end of this sort of a chain. So this is a real great one. We looked at the San Diego River trash cleanup. That first question was, what are the relative sources of trash contributed to waterways? For example, from city streets and from illegal dumping and homeless encampments. So this is a map that shows the locations and types of trash that exist all throughout San Diego River watershed. And you can click on each of these dots and get different information about those locations. Another example from the Central Coast, we have a hydrographic mapping of trash prioritization with hotspots along with the storm drain network. So you know where the trash problems are most severe and most persistent, and where that trash goes hydrographically. So in this example, all of these hotspots of trash are draining down to the Watsonville Slough, and the top map is just the raw trash data that were collected that fed into that output. So those are just a couple of examples of data products to address that question of relative inputs of trash to waterways. And we stepped through each of the 4 questions in the same way, identifying where those greatest breaks in the chain were, and a few examples. So that was where we got to at the end of today. It was a great discussion. Everybody just made some fantastic contributions and contributed some really useful insights to get to these final maps that we resulted at the end. So thank you everyone so much for going through the process with us. Back to you, Ross.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Yeah, awesome work, you guys. And you had a significant amount of people in your guys' group too. So I imagine that is a lot of heads to put together, and a lot of different perspectives to meld together. So that's awesome work, you guys. I saw in the chat from Martha, can you share the PowerPoint? So all of these Google Slides are already available. In the email I sent out that had the links to each group's Google Slides, that would take you, if you click on that group's link, it would take you to that PowerPoint. Once I make more of a kind of comprehensive synopsis of the 2-day event, I will make sure those links are in that too when I send that out, as well as the recordings. So all that information is, it will be compiled and sent out to everybody, so you will have access to all of it. But yeah, awesome work on group 3, guys. Does anybody have any questions for them? Doesn't seem so. Okay, cool. Well, I just said what I was going to say right now, which is that we are going to compile all of this and make it a comprehensive synopsis for everybody. So that should be available in probably next week. But I'll make sure I have the email list of everybody involved. So we'll be able to send that out. We'll put it on the SFEI and a couple other websites as well too, just to make sure it is available to those who either wanted to see a different group or couldn't make it to the event today. So all the information will be available in the future. So I think that pretty much brings us to the end. I'd like to personally say thank all of you for your time over the last couple of days. I know one of the phrases I heard get tossed around a few times in these presentations at the end was if we had more time. And I think this is a really good opportunity that everyone had to kind of establish those connections and figure out different relationships and connections they want to maintain and projects they want to keep nurturing and moving forward on. So hopefully you guys continue to touch base outside of the event. All the contact information should be available through the links as well too. So I think there's 1,000 different ways you can go with this, and I hope that it was as productive for you as you wanted it to be. Great, yeah, so I guess final thoughts are just stay tuned for that combined synopsis of all the different groups, and we'll send out an exit survey as well too, probably at the end of this week. So thanks again for all your hard work. If anyone has any parting thoughts, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, thanks for attending the last 2 days, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks,